Hello and welcome to another episode of Barrelman TV. My name is Steve Fleck and I am the official announcer for the Barrelman Triathlon, MultiSport Canada Triathlon Series, and over 30 other running, cycling, and triathlon races all across North America. My guest today is Coach Sophie Hotchkiss from Endura Performance. Great to see you, Sophie.
Hi, Steve. Nice to see you again.
Where are you tuning in today to Barrelman TV? Where are you located?
I live in Toronto. I live and do most of my coaching in and out of Toronto.
Nice, nice. Now you're a veteran of the Barrelman. You've had the pleasure of racing that fabulous race course down on the Niagara Peninsula. Give us a bit of your own personal perspective of having raced the Barrelman in the past.
Yeah, Barrelman, I think is an awesome race. It's a lot of fun. The weather's always great. I like the heat, so that's always a plus for me. The course is awesome, and I think just being in and around the falls is always a really beautiful scenery to have an event. Barrelman was my first half distance race, so I love to continue going back and trying the course again and I'm just seeing my times improve. So I'm loving that event.
Will we see you on the start line in 3 weeks' time?
Yes, I'm excited. This is going to be maybe my third or fourth time racing Barrelman this year.
Nice. Okay. Well, we're looking forward to that. So, as hinted, we're about 3 weeks out, Sophie. So, from a coaching perspective here, I've heard it be said that in the final 3 weeks, before a big race, an A race, an important race, an end of the season race, that an athlete's really not going to build up their fitness or their performance to an extraordinarily higher level, but they can certainly throw all that fitness and the performance away by what they do in the final 3 weeks. So, what are some of the key things that athletes should be doing sort of at a high level or not be doing, as the case may be, in this final 3 weeks before the Barrelman?
Yeah, so 3 weeks out, as we know, adaptation to training takes time. So if you're doing too much training at this point, you may carry some of that fatigue over to race day. It does depend on the person and your fitness level and your experience level, but mostly now we are either finishing up a couple of key sessions or we're starting our taper and getting, focusing on rest and recovery so that you're ready for race day.
Is there such a thing as a perfect taper, or does that come retroactively looking back after the fact, after the perfect race? We've had the perfect race and we're going, oh, I must have had the perfect taper going in. Or are there other factors that contribute to a great taper?
I think I think there is a trial and error kind of period that you need to attempt with the taper. So I think overall you just need less training load. That's the biggest thing. That's what a taper is. You take, what do I normally do in my training session? Let's do a little bit less of it. Less time on our feet, more time on recovery. There is a wrong way to do a taper, which is doing too much and not giving yourself the rest that you need. But honestly, I think the biggest thing is taking notes, recording what you've done, reflecting after the fact, and then maybe trying something different next time around. So if you're constantly doing the same taper week over and over again, and you're not really seeing any changes, like let's try something different and see what works for you. It's a trial and error.
And should you, I mean, I know you're speaking at a high level here, but should this, if you are being coached by, a coach who, is giving you the workouts and working with, so I'm assuming that's going to be sort of two-way communication sort of with your coach about what the taper is actually all about and what you're doing in that time period, this final 3 weeks.
Yeah, so if you're working with a coach, that's going to be really good just for kind of reassurance of let's say you're training a lot and then you kind of enter your taper and you feel like, well, I'm not really doing very much. You have to work and communicate with your coach and say, am I doing too little? Am I still doing too much? Where's the fine line? And then improving that next time you get to a race event.
Now, what if you get sick for some reason? I'm not thinking just COVID or something more sinister here. I'm just thinking sort of garden variety head cold or maybe a touch of some flu. Is it time to push the panic button if I get sick in these last 2 or 3 weeks?
Honestly, let's say you come down with a cold and your race is approaching. This recently happened to me. Honestly, just take the time to recover, listen to your body. You kind of have to just, whatever your mental process is, whether you say, planning I'm going to race or taking the stress off and saying I don't have to race. Whatever your process is, you have to go through that, but just listen to your body and take the rest time that you need. Do a couple of light training sessions before race day. At that point, that's going to be your best bet. You're going to rely either way on the training that you've done in the past. So pushing through a cold and trying to hit all these training sessions when you're not feeling well might set you up poorly for race day. Best to just rest, reassess, do a couple light training sessions, and then see if you're feeling up to racing when the day comes.
Now, I learned that personally myself back when I didn't know anything about this, or I thought anyone else knew anything about it. When my first time going to the Ironman World Championships way back in 1989, not to date myself here, but I did come down with a really bad head cold somewhere along the way getting to Kona, and I was sick. I was just lying around the condo doing nothing for literally 6 or 7 straight days. I got out, rode my bike a little bit, jogged, a couple of days, and then I did the race, and actually had not a bad race. So that was the cold. I called it the cold induced taper of doing absolutely nothing for the last week. I discovered by pure happenstance. So thank you for reinforcing that for athletes. Now, I know this isn't an area of expertise of yours specifically, but what about nutrition? Is there something from a nutrition standpoint here, when athletes are reducing the training load significantly, are there high level things they should be noting with regards to their general nutrition?
Okay, so the big thing that we see a lot of endurance athletes like to participate in is carbo loading. Carbo loading, according to the registered dietitian that I work with, has a good effect 48 hours before an event. So here at 3 weeks out, honestly, I would just follow your regular diet. For endurance athletes, especially people who are maybe younger or newer to the sport, that just means eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, and make healthy choices. I wouldn't say to avoid anything specifically or to start eating anything specifically. You don't have to dramatically change your diet right before an event. But if you're going to practice carbo loading, 48 hours before your race is when you could start doing that, and when it's actually going to help you for your race.
So now we're at race day or the day before, and we're thinking about sort of race day strategies. And you mentioned, Barrelman was your first, quite a bit longer race, first step up to that sort of half iron sort of distance racing. I know when we get to the start line in Welland, we'll probably have a good chunk of the people who will be in the same boat, Sophie. So what are some of the key things for those first timers that they need to be maybe thinking about sort of going into the race? Let's talk about the physiological things first, and then maybe I'll come back afterwards and talk a bit about the mental strategy.
Okay. So about nutrition around racing. Okay.
Just about generally about the race. I mean, for some, if they've done an Olympic, distance or maybe a sprint, I mean, this is a big step up. I mean, you're going from a race that's time wise, an hour and a half or like 3 hours. Now you're going to something that's like twice as long, 6 hours. So what are some of the big do's and don'ts for an athlete stepping up to this type of distance, for the first time?
Okay, so that's actually a great question. So when you're challenging a new distance, there is a level of, it doesn't matter how many years of racing experience you have, there's a level of uncertainty, and that can cause a bit of anxiety and stress around that race day. So what I love to practice going into a new distance is lowering your expectations a little bit and kind of focusing on one thing. And typically, if it's a new distance, that focus is going to be just get to the finish line. Like, let's let go of the ego a little bit. I don't have to do this race as fast as possible. I'm challenging myself in a new way. And the real reward here is going to be getting to the finish line. And then you have a chance to look at that race after the fact. And now we can challenge that distance again in the future. And now we can try and become a little bit faster or have a smoother transition. And you can start to pick parts of your race to improve on. But I really think stepping back and just having a goal of finishing the event, it really clears your head and just allows you to go through race day pretty smooth.
Would the higher level sort of overview of that, Sophie, just be a little bit more cautious, sort of and conservative with pacing? And I'm thinking specifically with regards to the swim, in the bike here, because if you're able to finish strongly on the run, I mean, that's such a positive sort of reinforcement. If I run really strongly and run really well at the end, then I'm going to feel really good about it, regardless of the place or the time.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say you go out really hard on the swim and really hard on the bike, and you're having a great day and you're feeling really strong and fast. But then this, as we know, is a longer distance than we're used to racing. Now we get to the run and we're feeling a little burnt out and tired. And in Barrelman's case, you have to run half marathon. So that's a long distance to push through mentally if you're not feeling strong anymore and like you burned too many matches earlier in the race. So being more conservative early on and finishing with a really solid run is just very good for boosting your confidence, and feeling like you've had a successful race day, regardless of what the time outcome ends up being.
Might this also be a good strategy for anyone doing the race, veterans included? Because people haven't raced for two years in some cases. They haven't raced this far for 2 years. Maybe they've not towed a starting line at all for 2 years. So I'm thinking maybe just being more cautious and conservative for everyone might be a better approach, even for the veterans. I mean, yourself, like coming back and doing it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's not a bad idea. So you kind of have to take a look at where you feel your training and your fitness is compared to 2 years ago. Because in a lot of people's cases, not having those races means they're not motivated to train as much. So I'm afraid a lot of people are going to step up to a race and expect results that they were getting 2 years ago, when really we're just trying to dust off the wheels, right, and get the ball rolling again. So it might be a good idea, and everyone's different. It might be a good idea if you're not sure of your finishing race time for this year, to kind of go in with a little bit of less expectation. Just say, I want to get back to racing, have a fun event, less stress, no pressure. Let's finish the Barrelman. And then, now we're back in the racing groove and we can start to build up some speed from there.
I think in some other contexts, usually I hear this a lot in track and field and running. They call it a rust buster. That first race, in the season, that there's someone that's coming back after like a season off, and they're racing outdoor track for the first time in almost a year. So it's a rust buster. So might everyone be best to treat sort of the Barrelman 2022 as a rust buster type of event?
I mean, that's a huge event to be a rust buster, honestly. Like, Barrelman is not a short race. You're going to be out there for a few hours. Like, you could do it in 5, you could do it in 8. So it's a big race, and anyone getting to the start line should just be proud that they're there at all and they're challenging that distance. But yeah, like, let's just go have a fun day and see where that takes us.
You've mentioned the heat earlier on and how you like the heat, Sophie, and we've been blessed at Barrelman. Every year we've had great weather, and we've had actually a couple of really hot days for sort of mid to late September. If it is a hot day, again, what are some of the high level, coping strategies that athletes could use to deal with those higher temperatures? Having said that, now it's going to be a cold and wet and rainy day, but let's deal with the heat first, and then we'll come back to the rain.
Well, let's have our fingers crossed, because honestly, racing with a sunny day is a lot better, especially when you get to run past the falls and you get kind of the cool misty breeze off the falls. That's always a blessing. So I think honestly, when it's a hot day, you have to make sure you're hydrating and drinking enough fluids. And that doesn't just mean water. You have to have Gatorade, whatever's on course, and you have to be taking in salt as well. Everyone's different in the level of salt that they need to put in, and you have to take into account that some of your gels or some of your nutrition, some of the solid foods you're taking in might also have salt content in them. You need to be supplementing that with salt pills or having a dash of salt in your water that you're drinking, just to help with your rehydration. Because if you're losing a lot of fluid and losing a lot of salt, you're going to start to feel dehydrated very, very quickly, especially when you're out there on the bike for so long, and then you have to run, and now it's like the middle of the day, and that's when it's nice and hot, and you don't get that breeze from the bike anymore. So that's when you really start to lose it. I think the last time I did Barrelman was a very, very hot day, and there was a lot of people walking because they're super great athletes, but if you don't get the salt and the water in that you need, your body can't really work for you anymore.
Now let's look like true experts and cover all the bases just in case we do get that day that it is wet and cold. Uh, let's switch it up a little bit. What are some of the coping strategies from your experience being a top level athlete when it is cold, when it is wet, when it's a little, grizzly out there? What are some of the strategies you would use to sort of get yourself through a day that might not be as pleasant on, the sun and the sunshine and the warm weather?
Yeah, honestly, just make sure that you have different gear so that you know you're doing what's comfortable. Like, let's say it's a rainy day and your socks are getting nice and wet on the bike, and you want to have nice, clean, dry socks on the run and dry shoes for that fact. You want to have that gear in your bag in like a plastic bag that's keeping it dry. So when you get to transition in T2 and you're ready to put on your running shoes, you have the option to put on like clean, dry socks, and your running shoes haven't been sitting out in the rain for the past 3 hours. There's a couple things that you can think of and plan ahead of time to make sure that you're comfortable getting through your whole race. And then it's also just a mindset thing. So if you look at the forecast and you know it's going to rain, just expect it to rain, because chances are it will. And that doesn't mean your race day is over. That doesn't mean you have to sit up on the bike and say, oh, this sucks, it's really rainy and kind of miserable. If you put your head down and just keep going and make sure that you're still getting the nutrition in that you had planned to get in. Because sometimes when it's raining or it's a bit cooler, we forego drinking and eating as much. So make sure you have a plan, you're sticking to it, and you're making yourself as comfortable as possible, but you're still pushing through.
This has been great advice, Sophie. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. This is, I'm sure, been super helpful information for everyone, veteran or otherwise, newcomer or newbie, doing the 2022 Barrelman in 3 weeks' time. Thank you again, Sophie. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I look forward to seeing you on race day.
You've been watching another episode of Barrelman TV, and my guest today has been Sophie Hotchkiss from Endura Performance. I'm Steve Fleck on behalf of the whole team at Barrelman and MultiSport Canada. Thank you for watching. Until the next time.